So recently I read the book The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, written in 1890, and I wanted to analyze it because I liked it a lot more than I expected, and I found it to be very thematically layered and beautifully written. Let's get into it. So first, let me give you a brief summary of the plot. A painter named Basil Hallward, or I don't know if it would be Basil in British English. I'm going to say Basil from here on out. A painter named Basil Hallward. I actually really love British accents. I'm obsessed with them. But anyway, the painter paints a young man named Dorian Gray. Basil seems practically infatuated with Dorian. He says he's put like a part of himself in the painting, which becomes a metaphor for how the artist reveals himself through his art. Dorian Gray comes to look at the painting, and he also meets Basil's bad boy friend, Lord Henry, who will become quite a bad influence on him. Lord Henry is telling Dorian Gray how he's so young and beautiful, and he tells him about the importance and the fleeting nature of beauty and youth. So Dorian secretly makes a wish that he will remain just as young and beautiful his whole life, while his sins and his age will only be visible on the painting. And surprise, surprise, his wish comes true. Then Dorian starts to go down a dark path. So at the time, he's in love with this actress named Sybil Vane, but after he makes this wish, he takes his friends to go see Sybil acting, and she does a terrible job that night, and he completely falls out of love with her. He's really cruel to her, and she ends up taking her own life. And he doesn't really feel anything after that. He feels like he's more just watching a play. He views it in a very objectifying way, without a lot of empathy and without really seeing Sybil's humanity. Now after that, Dorian descends into a life of hedonism and sin. You know, he's like going to opium dens, he's breaking women's hearts. We don't know exactly what else he's doing, but it's hinted that it's pretty bad. Every man associated with him experiences reputational damage and becomes estranged from him, and over time his portrait gets uglier and uglier. He covers the painting with a pall, which I understand is like a cloth used to cover dead bodies, which is interesting because I wonder if that's almost like the death of his soul, the painting as a reflection of his soul. And after years of this behavior, Basil confronts Dorian about the things he's hearing about him, and Dorian shows him the portrait. And when Basil begs him to repent for his sins, Dorian is overcome with hatred and he murders Basil. He then blackmails a former friend into helping him cover it up. Now, Sybil's brother, a sailor who went to Australia, comes to avenge Sybil. But while he's following Dorian, he's accidentally shot during hunting, and that's when Dorian's guilt and his conscience start to come to the surface. In the end, Dorian tries to stab the painting and repent for his sins, but when the servants find him, it's Dorian who's dead, looking the way his painting did, while the painting is restored back to its original look. The end can be interpreted in a number of different ways. For me personally, I wondered if it means that when the almost Faustian bargain no longer works for Dorian, things revert to how they should have been, where you see his sins visible on his body, while the painting remains unchanged. Or it could also mean that when he repents for his sins, the unnatural goes back to its natural form. I'm sure there are also other ways of interpreting it, so let me know what you think down in the comments if you've read the book or seen the movie. Now, the novel is filled with Wilde's insights on the nature of art. We see in the preface Oscar Wilde's philosophy of aestheticism, which I realized is actually quite aligned with my own philosophy on art. He says the artist is the creator of beautiful things, which is kind of in line with my stance that art and beauty are sort of interchangeable words. Every form of beauty that I can think of, whether it is decorating your home, deciding what to wear that day, putting on makeup, doing your hair, making a lovely meal, all of these beautiful things are to me art forms. And art forms are inherently beautiful, whether it's a painting, a book, a movie. To me, these are beautiful when done well. Even if they're portraying like the ugly, gritty parts of life, even if, a book is describing like the slums of a city, I think that that is beautiful if done well. So apparently this attitude is quite in line with aestheticism, which is a movement from the late 19th century that valued the appearance of literature, music, fonts, and the arts over their functions. It was a break from moralism. Wilde believed that art is amoral, where at the time, novels, for instance, were very didactic. They really had like a message, usually a Christian message, that was telling you how you should behave in society. There's a quote from this novel that I think perfectly exemplifies the philosophy of aestheticism. A chance tone of color in a room or a morning sky, a particular perfume that you would come across again, a cadence from a piece of music that you would cease to play, I tell you, Dorian, that it is on things like these that our lives depend. I completely agree. Beauty, experiencing beauty in the world in my everyday life is one of the things for which I live. Wilde also has a beautiful stance on the critique of art. He says diversity of opinion about a work of art shows that the work is new, complex, and vital. When critics disagree, the artist is in accord with himself. Art is supposed to be polarizing, and it's supposed to make people feel something. Whether that something is positive or negative, it doesn't really matter. When I think about like what I want my art to do, this might sound a little crazy, but I want to scare people. I want to make people feel heartbreak. Like that's why I write gothic horror, is I want to take people to these like dark places, and I want to also have them feel hope and redemption and compassion, the whole spectrum of human emotions. It's not just about making people feel good and making them like the work of art. Whether you like the work of art is not as relevant as whether you feel strongly about it. There is one thing that Oscar Wilde says that I disagree with. He says to reveal art and conceal the artist is art's aim. He also says an artist should create beautiful things but should put nothing of his own life into them. I don't think that this is possible. I actually think that all art is autobiographical. When an artist chooses to create a work of art about something, it's because that something is either a part of them or like deeply affected them to the point where maybe it is a part of them. For example, I can think of plenty of instances where I wrote in my fiction about feelings that I've actually felt, or where the plot was kind of a metaphor for an experience that I actually had. Now, I've also written about things that I haven't experienced, for example, a miscarriage. But even when I haven't experienced those things deeply impacted me to the point where it almost like became a part of me. You know, like I've had family members, I've known people who have had very traumatic miscarriages, and it affected me on such a deep level that, like, think about it. For something to affect you so much that you turn it into a piece of art, it kind of has to be a little bit of a part of you. The portrait in the picture of Dorian Gray does represent a mirror for the self, and I do think that Oscar Wilde revealed a lot about himself in the writing of this novel, which is the perfect segue into my next point. The homoerotic subtext and reputational damage that mirrors Wilde's own life. So maybe Wilde changed his mind later on about good art needing to conceal the artist, because he later admitted, Basil Hallward is what I think I am, Lord Henry is what the world thinks me, Dorian what I would like to be, in other ages perhaps. So I didn't know this until I read this book, but Oscar Wilde was actually exiled because of accusations of sodomy. Apparently there was someone who accused him of having a gay relationship, and he sued that person for libel. And as a result of that case, it actually became apparent that he was gay, and charges were pressed against him for that, and so he needed to flee to France. So I wonder if it was his own reputation that he was describing when he wrote, curious stories became current about him. Men would whisper to each other in corners, or pass him with a sneer, or look at him with cold, searching eyes, as though they were determined to discover his secret. Why is your friendship so fatal to young men? This one is really interesting in the context of knowing that Wilde tends to like teen boys in particular. One has a right to judge of a man by the effect he has over his friends. Yours seem to lose all sense of honor, of goodness, or purity. You have filled them with a madness for pleasure. They have gone down into the depths. You led them there. They had been great friends once, 5 years before. Almost inseparable indeed. Then the intimacy had come suddenly to an end. When they met in society now, it was only Dorian Gray who smiled. Alan Campbell never did. So in addition to the reputational damage that he describes in the book, sort of foreshadowing what he would later experience, the book also contains what some would consider pretty homoerotic undertones. For instance, Basil's infatuation with Dorian. I see everything in him. He is never more present in my work than when no image of him is there. There seemed to him to be something tragic in a friendship so colored by romance. And also in Dorian's idealization of Lord Henry, where we see like Dorian finds everyone kind of boring except for Lord Henry. He is sort of like a father or big brother figure, but Dorian really appreciates and admires Lord Henry to the point where it sort of begs the question if there's some sort of romantic tension between the two of them. So in the Victorian era, same-sex affection was quite normalized, with people of the same sex even sleeping in the same bed at times, despite the fact that being gay was highly stigmatized. So in a way, it was almost like this sort of affection was allowed because being gay was so far from what people considered to be okay. But the same-sex affection also gave plausible deniability in works of fiction where homoerotic undertones were present, such as this this one. The novel also talks a lot about hedonism, vanity, and immorality. And in the novel, the three are definitely interconnected. Hedonism, the pursuit of pleasure at the cost of all else, is considered immoral. Vanity is considered immoral, and hedonism and vanity sort of go together in Dorian's wish that he would remain eternally beautiful and young. In a way, Wilde is kind of exploring the dark side of aestheticism, the chase for eternal youth, immoral behavior used to gain pleasure, the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill is when you chase pleasure at the cost of all else, and eventually it becomes addictive. Nothing is enough anymore. You do one thing that gives you a lot of pleasure, and the next time you need to do something a little bit more over the top, and the next time a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, until nothing is ever enough. He had mad hungers that grew more ravenous as he fed them. Eternal youth, infinite passion, pleasure subtle and secret, wild joys and wilder sins. He was to have all these things. The only way to get rid of a temptation is to yield to it, resist it, and your soul grows sick with longing for things it has forbidden to itself, with desire for what its monstrous laws have made monstrous and unlawful. So there is some truth to this, like we know that priests, for instance, who repress their sexuality tend to go on to be sex offenders, but moderation is the key. It's not about completely giving into your every impulse and desire for pleasure. Usually there's like a healthy middle ground, and both extremes are extremely unhealthy. I found it interesting that Wilde had an appreciation for beauty and the aesthetic that a lot of at least modern day male writers often lack. I think you can kind of sense that there's maybe a little bit more of a feminine side to him, because a lot of, at least modern day male authors, write very bare bones. They stick to like, this person did this person said that. They don't focus as much on like embedding you within the aesthetics of what's happening. I'm generalizing a whole bunch here. Like there are plenty of male authors who write beautifully aesthetic things, but I think Wilde's in particular, his appreciation for the aesthetic really bleeds through the work of art. There's an entire chapter in which he describes fashion and decor and beautiful textiles and exotic birds and colorful gemstones. The novel is richly written with a lot of atmosphere, like fantastic shadows of birds in flight flitted across the long tussar silk curtains, burying his face in the great cool lilac blossoms, feverishly drinking in their perfume as if it had been wine. The leaves had tossed his rebellious curls and tangled all their gilded threads. Sipping some pale yellow wine from a delicate gold-beaded bubble of Venetian glass and looking dreadfully bored. I think these are beautiful lines. I loved the book because it was written much more vividly than I expected it to be. And like I said, the book also sends the message that there is immorality in living a life of indulgence and sin. And in Christianity, indulgence often is a form of sin. And Lord Henry, in his one-liners, often reveals a lot about sort of the battle of the sexes that was common at that time that arguably is still common today. He says, men marry because they are tired, women because they are curious. Both are disappointed. Being adored is a nuisance. Women treat us just as humanity treats its gods. They worship us and are always bothering us to do something for them. I'm afraid the women appreciate cruelty, downright cruelty, more than anything else. They have wonderfully primitive instincts. We have emancipated them, but they remain slaves looking for their masters all the same. They love being dominated. When a woman marries again, it is because she detested her first husband. When a man marries again, it is because he adored his first wife. Women try their luck, men risk theirs. Women love us for our defects. If we have enough of them, they will forgive us everything, even our intellects. A man can be happy with any woman as long as he does not love her. So a lot of Lord Henry's lines come off very misogynistic and really reveal this like tension that was often present between men and women at the time. In conclusion, I thought that this was a beautifully written piece of prose with powerful themes, vivid characters, and a hidden tapestry that reveals a lot of the author's own experience given the times in which it was written. Even though Oscar Wilde was a victim of homophobia at the time, arguably he also lived a life of sin because he was going after teens. And so it's kind of this tension between him and Dorian Gray as a victim of society, yet also a perpetrator of immoral behavior. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think that it's possible for the artist to create an art piece that doesn't reveal something about them? What do you think the novel reveals about Oscar Wilde's attitudes? Are you aligned with aestheticism, or do you tend to follow a different philosophy on art? Let me know down in the comments. Hope this video was interesting to you, and see you soon.
Tell me what you mean.